It was supposed to be just another Halloween party. The small town of Ravenswood was known for its elaborate Halloween celebrations. Every year, the townsfolk hosted a massive gathering at the old abandoned church on the outskirts of town. Decorated with cobwebs, fake skeletons, and flickering jack-o'-lanterns, it was the perfect setting for a spooky night of costumes, laughter, and harmless scares. But this year felt different. Emma, Jake, and their friends arrived late to the party. The old church already packed with people in costumes. The place was buzzing with excitement, but Emma couldn't shake a strange sense of unease. The air inside felt heavy. The shadows cast by the dim candles seemed to move on their own, and the ancient stone walls seemed to echo whispers she couldn't quite hear. "Relax," Jake said, noticing her discomfort. "It's just Halloween vibes. They probably set up some speakers to make it creepier." Emma forced a smile and followed him deeper into the crowd. As the night went on, the usual festivities unfolded. Dancing, drinking, and plenty of ghost stories. But then, just as the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere shifted. The music stopped abruptly, leaving an unsettling silence. The candles flickered violently before going out, plunging the church into darkness. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd, but it quickly died when the massive church doors slammed shut on their own. "What the hell was that?" someone shouted, their voice echoing through the cold stone hall. Before anyone could respond, a low, guttural sound filled the air, a deep, unnatural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The crowd froze as a chilling wind swept through the church, carrying with it a foul, decayed smell. And then, the first scream. At the far end of the church, where the old altar stood, something began to rise. It was tall, humanoid, but wrong. Its movements jerky, its body wrapped in tattered burial cloth. Its face was a rotting mask of flesh and bone, and its hollow eyes glowed with an unholy light. "What is that?" Emma whispered, backing away. Before anyone could process what they were seeing, the creature lunged into the crowd with terrifying speed. Chaos erupted as people screamed and scrambled to escape, but the doors wouldn't budge. More figures began to rise from the shadows, shambling, decayed corpses that moved with horrifying precision. They were relentless, clawing and biting at anyone in their path. "They're dead!" someone shouted. "They're all dead!" Emma and Jake managed to duck behind a pew, their hearts pounding as the sounds of terror filled the air. Through the chaos, Emma spotted something strange on the far wall, a massive stone seal carved with ancient symbols. It glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "That's got to be it," she said, grabbing Jake's arm. "Whatever's happening, it started with that." "What are we supposed to do?" Jake yelled, his voice cracking. "I don't know, but we can't just sit here." Emma grabbed a broken piece of wood from the floor and held it tightly. "We have to try." The two of them made their way toward the glowing seal, dodging the creatures as best they could. Around them, the remaining partygoers were either fighting for their lives or falling victim to the undead. The growls and screams blended into a cacophony of pure horror. When they reached the seal, Emma realized it was covered in blood. Fresh, dripping blood. At its center was a small, hollow indentation, as if something had been removed. "Someone opened it," she said, her voice trembling. "Someone let them out." "Then how do we close it?" Jake asked, frantically looking around. Before Emma could respond, one of the creatures lunged at them. Jake swung the wooden plank, managing to knock it back, but more were closing in. Desperation surged through Emma as her eyes locked on a nearby altar. There, sitting among dusty candles and decayed flowers, was an ornate silver dagger. "That has to be it," she shouted, pointing to the dagger. "Grab it!" Jake sprinted to the altar, dodging another corpse, and snatched the dagger. He threw it to Emma just as one of the creatures tackled him to the ground. "Emma, do it!" he screamed, struggling to keep the thing's snapping jaws away from his throat. Emma turned back to the seal and plunged the dagger into the glowing indentation. The reaction was immediate. The seal blazed with a blinding light, and a deafening roar echoed through the church. The undead froze, their glowing eyes flickering before they crumbled to the ground like lifeless husks. The heavy doors of the church creaked open, letting in the cool night air. Emma collapsed to her knees, her hands shaking as she dropped the dagger. Around her, the survivors, those who hadn't fallen to the creatures, staggered out into the night, their faces pale and their eyes wide with shock. But as Emma looked back at the seal, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Though the glow had faded, the symbols were still there, faintly pulsing as if waiting. The survivors never spoke of what happened in the church that night. The town claimed the deaths were the result of a structural collapse, a tragedy blamed on poor maintenance. But Emma knew the truth. Every Halloween since, she's felt it. That same heavy air, that faint metallic tang. And sometimes when the night is quiet and the wind whispers through Ravenswood, she swears she hears a low, guttural growl. The dead are never truly gone. It was a crisp Halloween night in the small town of Willow Creek. Streets were alive with children in costumes, pumpkin lanterns flickered on every porch, and the distant echo of laughter filled the air. But for siblings Mia, 12, and Ethan, 9, the night would be anything but fun. Their parents had gone to a Halloween party, leaving them home alone for the evening. "We'll be back by midnight," their mom had said, kissing their foreheads. "Just stay inside. Don't answer the door and don't get into trouble." Mia, ever the responsible older sibling, locked the doors and pulled the curtains shut as soon as the house grew quiet. Ethan, on the other hand, was glued to the TV, watching a marathon of old monster movies. "Ethan, you shouldn't watch that stuff," Mia said, sitting next to him with a bowl of popcorn. "You'll scare yourself." "Come on, Mia, I'm not a baby," Ethan replied, though his hands gripped the remote a little tighter during the creepy scenes. Hours passed, and the laughter and sounds of trick-or-treaters outside slowly faded. The neighborhood grew eerily quiet, with only the occasional rustle of leaves or distant hoot of an owl breaking the silence. That's when they heard the first knock. It was slow, deliberate, and loud enough to echo through the house. Knock, knock, knock. Mia and Ethan froze. "No one's supposed to knock," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. Their parents had specifically told them not to open the door for anyone. "Probably just some late trick-or-treaters," Mia said, trying to sound confident. She peeked through the curtain but saw nothing on the front porch. The knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time it was louder, more insistent. "Go away!" Mia shouted, her voice trembling. Silence followed, but it wasn't the comforting kind. It was the kind that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Then the back door rattled. Mia grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him into the kitchen. "We need to check the locks," she whispered. They crept toward the back door, their footsteps silent on the hardwood floor. The lock was still in place, but the door handle jiggled violently, as if someone were trying to force their way in. "Who's there?" Mia demanded, her voice cracking. No answer, just the faint sound of scraping, like nails dragging against the wood. Ethan whimpered, clutching her arm. "It's not a person, Mia. It's something else." Suddenly, the sound stopped. The house fell deathly quiet again, but Mia wasn't reassured. She grabbed her dad's flashlight from the counter and led Ethan upstairs, locking them both in her bedroom. They sat together on the bed, the flashlight beam flickering across the room. "We'll just stay here until Mom and Dad get back," Mia said, trying to stay calm. But as she spoke, they both heard it. Slow, heavy footsteps on the stairs. Mia's heart pounded as the steps drew closer. The floorboards creaked under the weight of whoever or whatever was coming. Ethan buried his face in her shoulder, shaking. The footsteps stopped right outside their bedroom door. "Go away," Mia shouted, her voice breaking. The only response was a soft, unnatural laugh. It wasn't a child's laugh or even an adult's. It was hollow and distorted, like a broken toy. The door handle twisted, but it didn't open. Whatever was on the other side began knocking. 3 slow, rhythmic knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan began to cry. "Mia, make it stop!" Summoning all her courage, Mia grabbed a broom from the corner of the room and approached the door. "Leave us alone," she yelled, swinging the door open. The hallway was empty. Before she could react, every light in the house went out, plunging them into darkness. The flashlight flickered once and died. Panic surged as a new sound emerged, scratching, like claws on the walls, moving rapidly around the room. "It's in here," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. The air grew cold and a shadow appeared in the corner, darker than the rest of the room. It moved, stretching unnaturally tall, its glowing red eyes locking onto them. "Leave us alone!" Mia screamed, grabbing Ethan and backing into the far corner. But the shadow advanced, its presence suffocating. Just as it lunged, headlights flashed through the window, and the sound of a car door slamming broke the silence. The shadow froze, then dissipated into thin air, leaving only the lingering scent of decay. "Mia? Ethan? We're home!" Their mom's voice called from downstairs. The siblings ran to their parents, tears streaming down their faces. They tried to explain what had happened, but their parents dismissed it as a bad Halloween prank or overactive imaginations. But later that night, as Mia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she heard it again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks at the window. Knock, knock, knock. She didn't dare look. It was Halloween night, and the streets of Maplewood buzzed with excitement. Costumed kids darted between houses, their laughter echoing under the glow of jack-o'-lanterns. Among them was a group of friends: Ellie, the fearless leader, her brother Max, who was always up for a dare, quiet but clever Lily, and Ryan, the prankster. This year they decided to do something different. Instead of just trick-or-treating, they wanted a real scare. That's how they found themselves standing in front of the house on Blackwood Lane. The house had a sinister reputation. It was old, its paint peeling, and windows boarded up. Locals claimed it had been abandoned for decades, but some swore they'd seen faint lights flicker inside at night. Rumors of its past varied. Some said a witch had lived there. Others whispered about a reclusive man who disappeared after his family was found dead in the basement. "This is it," Ellie said, her voice steady. "The scariest house in town." "Are we seriously doing this?" Lily asked, hugging her arms tightly. "What's the worst that could happen?" Ryan said with a grin. "It's just an old house." Max hesitated, glancing at Ellie. "What's the plan?" Ellie smirked, holding up a flashlight. "We go inside, take a look around, and prove we're not scared." The others exchanged uneasy glances, but followed her up the creaking steps to the front door. It was slightly ajar, swaying in the wind. Ryan pushed it open with a dramatic flare, the hinges groaning loudly. Inside, the air was stale and heavy. Moonlight streamed through cracks in the boarded windows, casting eerie shadows on the warped floorboards. The smell of mildew mixed with something metallic, something faintly rotten. "Spooky," Ryan said, his voice echoing in the empty space. He pretended to shiver. "Oh, ghosts! Come out, wherever you are!" "Don't do that," Lily hissed. "What if someone's actually here?" The group moved cautiously through the house, their footsteps crunching on broken glass and debris. They found themselves in a long hallway, its walls lined with faded, dusty portraits. The faces in the frames were unsettling, pale, expressionless, their eyes seeming to follow the kids as they walked. "This place gives me the creeps," Max muttered. "Good," Ellie said, trying to sound brave. "That's the point." They reached a staircase that spiraled up into darkness. "Let's check upstairs," Ellie suggested. "No way," Lily said firmly. "We've already been in here long enough." But Ellie was already climbing, and the others reluctantly followed. The stairs groaned under their weight, each step louder than the last. When they reached the top, they found a long corridor with several doors. One of them was slightly open, and a dim light flickered inside. "Who left that on?" Ryan whispered. "No one," Ellie replied. "This place doesn't even have power." They moved toward the door, their breaths shallow. Inside was a small room, its walls covered in yellowed newspaper clippings. The headlines were chilling. "Family vanishes without a trace. Mystery of Blackwood Lane house deepens. Body found in basement identified as missing child." On a table in the center of the room sat an old rusted lantern, its flame barely flickering. Next to it lay a single piece of paper with scrawled handwriting. "Stay out. It knows you're here." What does that mean?" Lily stammered. A loud bang from downstairs made them all jump. "What was that?" Max exclaimed. "Probably the wind," Ryan said, though his voice trembled. But the sound came again, closer this time. It wasn't the wind. It was footsteps, slow and deliberate, climbing the stairs. "We need to leave, now," Lily said, her voice shaking. The group bolted from the room, but as they reached the top of the staircase, they froze. Standing at the bottom was a figure. It was tall, its face obscured by shadows. The dim light of the lantern caught the edge of something sharp in its hand. An axe, rusted and dripping. It started up the stairs, each step echoing through the house. "Run!" Ellie screamed, pulling the others toward the hallway. They ducked into another room, slamming the door shut behind them. Max pushed a heavy dresser against the door as the footsteps grew louder. "What is that thing?" Ryan cried. "I don't know," Ellie shouted. "Just keep quiet." The footsteps stopped outside the door. For a moment there was silence, and then a slow, deliberate knock. Knock, knock, knock. "Let's go out the window," Max said, pointing to a broken frame. The others didn't argue. One by one, they climbed out onto the slanted roof, the cold night air biting at their skin. As Ellie helped Lily down to the ground, the door behind them burst open. The figure stepped into the room, its glowing eyes locking onto them. With a guttural growl, it lunged toward the window, but they were already running. They didn't stop until they reached the safety of the main road. Turning back, they saw the house looming in the distance, its broken windows glowing faintly as if the darkness inside were alive. "What was that thing?" Max panted. "I don't know," Ellie said, her voice trembling. "But we're never going back there." The next day, they told their story to anyone who would listen, but the townsfolk just shook their heads. "The Blackwood Lane house has been empty for years," one old man said. "Whatever you saw, it wasn't human." From that night on, the kids avoided the house. But every Halloween, they'd hear stories of others who dared to enter, and how none of them ever came back. And sometimes, late at night, they'd swear they could see a figure standing in the house's window, holding an axe, waiting for the next group of fools to come knocking.